hearing will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Before I deliver opening remarks, I wanted to note that today's committee hearing is meeting both in person and virtually. Today's committee hearing from the Science, Space, and Technology Committee of the House of Representatives Subcommittee on Research and Technology. Just a couple of reminders for members about the conduct of this hearing. First, members and committee staff who are attending in person may choose to be masked. It is obviously not a requirement. However, any individuals with symptoms, a positive test, or exposure to someone with COVID-19 should wear a mask while present. Members who are attending virtually should keep their video feed on as long as they are present for the hearing. Members are responsible for their own microphones. Please also keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking. Finally, if members have documents they wish to submit for the record, please email them to the committee clerk, whose email address was circulated prior to the hearing. And a special thank you to House Science Committee professional staff for traveling from Washington, D.C. to Oakland County, Michigan for today's hearing, setting up the virtual component as well as the physical component of today's hearing. So, good morning. It is so exciting to be gathered here in Pontiac, Michigan at the Oakland County Commission Chambers. I am delighted to host today's hearing as your subcommittee chair for research and technology, and I extend a warm welcome and thank you to my esteemed colleagues and our distinguished panel of witnesses. Certainly my colleague, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who has been a champion and a deal maker of the subject matter at hand, the electric vehicle workforce. I also want to extend my gratitude to the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. We are joined here today by Commissioner Gwen Markham, but the whole Board of Commissioners who has let us use their space, their convening space, and certainly want to also offer up my special appreciation to Oakland County Executive Dave Coulter and Oakland County Commissioner Chair David Woodward for their leadership, not only for our county, but again for the subject matter at hand, how we are going to win the future. We are here today to examine how to build a workforce to navigate the electric vehicle future. Michigan has been at the forefront, as we well know, of automotive innovation for generations. Not only did we put the world on wheels a century ago at the beginning of the 20th century, but an entire innovation ecosystem sprung up around transformative mobility. So let's be clear. Michigan has led the way. As the first state to complete a border-to-border interstate in 1960, the home to the first four-way electric traffic light installed not far from here in Detroit in 1918. The first highway materials testing lab in the nation was opened in Ann Arbor in 1912, and General Motors produced the first modern electric automobile in 1996. Now, our automotive companies, Ford, General Motors, Stellantis, along with a remarkable supply chain that surrounds us here today in Oakland County, Michigan, are leading the world in electric vehicle technology and the innovation ecosystems that are at the very backbone of the country's economy. As many of you know, chief among my priorities is to champion our manufacturing economy and its workforce in the halls of Congress. I've sought to understand challenges facing local manufacturers, keep my finger on the pulse of their needs through what I call Manufacturing Monday, my Manufacturing Monday visits. Every week I get the opportunity to see the very innovation in the electric vehicle space that is happening in our own backyard, from Allison Transmission's facility in Auburn Hills and Continentals to Intercell reshaping battery manufacturing technology in Troy to One Next Energy in Novi. Many of the guests before us here today paying witness to today's hearing, either virtually or in person here in the Oakland County Commission chambers. The opportunities, my friends, are right here. So not only has Southeast Michigan been at the forefront of industry, we have also had the enthusiasm for an electric vehicle future, from local leaders hungry to become a part of the solution to a cleaner environment. Communities like Troy, Royal Oak, Berkeley, Canton, and Ferndale, we're joined here today by Ferndale's mayor, Melanie Piana, are taking great strides to be the early adopters needed to support the development and deployment of an electric vehicle infrastructure, all of which will be fueled by Michigan's workforce. Michigan remains the preeminent automotive manufacturing hub in our nation. Our discussion today will focus on a vital element of continuing this leadership, the workforce. Because let's be clear, we can develop the most cutting-edge battery technology in the world, but that innovation only translates into economic and environmental benefits through the work of talented men and women who make it happen on the factory floor and in our communities as they're setting up the infrastructure. Our panel today includes representatives from the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, as well as Macomb Community College, home of the Center for Advanced Automotive Technology and National Science Foundation-funded Advanced Technological Education Center. They are doing extraordinary work to prepare a workforce to power the electric vehicle future. Many auto workers have spent their entire career in the field and are experts in what they do. So I'm also very honored to have the United Auto Workers here to discuss paths that ensure the transition to electric vehicles that is good for the environment and good for workers. We can't say that enough. We cannot discount workers or see them cut out of the deal. We cannot see Michigan plants close at the expense of new and proliferating technology. Oh no, my friends, it will be exactly the opposite. It needs to be more work and better jobs, and something that can be led by our friends in labor. Manufacturing electric vehicles is just one element of an electric vehicle future. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which I was proud to vote for and was signed into law just last November, provides $7.5 billion to develop the electric vehicle charging infrastructure with the goal of installing 500,000 public chargers nationwide by 2030. The communities I mentioned here in Oakland County are ripe and ready for that investment. Michigan will lead the way. To meet these goals, we'll need a highly trained workforce, though, capable of installing and maintaining these charging stations. Unfortunately, we may be faced with labor shortage of qualified electricians right here when we need them most, but we have heard from stakeholders throughout southeastern Michigan. We've heard from our friends in IBEW. 35% of this workforce is retirement ready and may leave in the next 5 to 7 years. So I'm excited to hear more about the gold standard for training electricians in the EV sector and the electric vehicle infrastructure training program. There is a story to tell coming out of southeastern Michigan that despite a pandemic and shutdowns and at times a stymied workforce because of COVID-19, we never stop, my friends. We never stop responding to PPE shortages or supply chain disruptions facing American consumers. In fact, while the auto industry sourced and produced PPE and ventilators, we continued innovating on the electric vehicle front and the products in demand around the world. Has it been easy with a semiconductor and chip shortage? Certainly not. Do we still need to tackle that issue? Absolutely we do. But today we are setting the stage from Oakland County. We will remember this hearing and the incredible words and recommendations of our witnesses. What we discover, inquire, and capture here today will not only be for memory, it will be etched in the congressional record as part of our ongoing legislative body of work. How will electric vehicles shape our workforce, and how will our workforce lead? So before I introduce our witnesses, I would like to ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter of support from one of Michigan's 11 very own township supervisors, Canton Township Supervisor Anne Marie Graham Hudak, highlighting the importance of today's field hearing for local governments in Michigan. Her letter outlined the creative ways Canton is partnering with SEMCOG to apply for electric vehicle chargers funding for the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the workforce necessary to maintain and install chargers. So I'd like to thank Canton Township Supervisor Graham Hudak for submitting a letter and for her passion on this topic. And at this time, I would like to turn to Congresswoman, my friend, Debbie Dingell, who will also give an opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Stevens, for inviting me and holding today's important field hearing to examine the electric vehicle workforce needs that the industry is facing. Lawmakers need to understand it as we begin the transformational shift towards electrifying the transportation sector. If we are to be successful and continue our global leadership in building the vehicles of the future right here in Michigan, we will need a strong American workforce. I've always been a car girl. I'm proud of it. Now I'm an EV car girl. And I'm very proud of the fact that Michigan put the world on wheels 100 years ago. And I want to make sure that the United States and Michigan stays at the forefront of innovation and technology worldwide and continues to be the mobility leader. The future of the auto industry is electric. We know this. Michigan has been leading the way on this front. Ford, headquartered in Dearborn, Michigan, recently announced a new global battery center in Southeast Michigan and not only unveiled the all-electric F-150 Lightning, but is committed to doubling down on its production to meet demands. General Motors, finally, what we want to do is be bringing these battery plants to Michigan. And it took losing 2 Ford plants to, I think, wake up the Michigan community that we want to make sure we are not losing those plants, and General Motors will be, very excitingly, locating their next battery plant in Oakland County, where it really matters. Stellantis is doing the same kind of work. A lot of people are looking at locating the kind of work that we want to keep here in Michigan. I was very proud of last year, it was last August, to stand at the White House with the President, all of the OEMs, all of the environmentalists, and the union presidents, as the President announced an ambitious new target to make half of all new vehicles sold in 2030 zero-emission vehicles. And by the way, that came about as the result of a lot of hard work. The environmentalists and the unions sitting down at a table, each talking about their issues, talking about their concerns, understanding each other's concerns, and working together to find solutions to where the issues were going to be. With this landmark announcement, and with more and more EVs expected to hit the roads over the coming years, it's critical we're getting the policies right, so this transition is swift and supports a strong American-built workforce. I was at Region 1A, the UAW, with a cross-section of UAW workers at Region 1A about a month ago. And interestingly, the number one issue, and the only issue that most of them wanted to talk about, was training the workforce for the future. How people were going to need skills, how these were complex vehicles. People used to be worried, and I think there's still some anxiety, that as you go from the internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle, will there be fewer jobs? There'll be new jobs, different jobs, and the workers want to make sure that they're going to be trained themselves and that there will be workers that are going to be trained to work there with them. That's very important. So that's why today's field hearing is so important. The EV workforce is essential to the future of this country. And what better place for a field hearing than the home of where it all began? Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Great. And at this time, I would like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Ms. Jennifer Mefford. Ms. Mefford is the national co-chair of the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program, EVITP, a volunteer coalition of automakers, utility partners, and EV stakeholders that delivers charging infrastructure installation training and certification throughout the U.S. and Canada. Ms. Mefford has more than 30 years of experience in business and workforce development. Our next witness is Mr. Ben Cruz. Mr. Cruz is the director of the Center for Advanced Automotive Technology at Macomb Community College. CAAT is an advanced technological education center funded by the National Science Foundation, something that we care a lot about on the Science Committee, that partners with industry, education, government, and professional organizations to deliver curricula and skills training in advanced automotive technology programs. Prior to joining Macomb Community College, Mr. Cruz was Senior Engineer Group Manager for GM at the Warren Technical Center. We are also joined here today by Mr. Josh Nassar. Mr. Nassar is the Legislative Director for the United Auto Workers, the UAW. In this role, he works closely with Congress, the executive branch, and stakeholders to design a legislative strategy on labor, trade, environment, healthcare, defense, energy, tax policy, and other issues. Mr. Nassar previously worked as an assistant legislative director for the Service Employees International Union. He also worked as the vice president for federal affairs at the Center for Responsible Lending and served as a legislative assistant for Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. Lastly, we are also joined by Ms. Marcia Black-Watson. Ms. Black-Watson serves as the Industry Engagement Division Administrator for the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. In this role, she leads a team that promotes demand-driven workforce development strategies to help attract, retain, and develop talent in high-growth, high-wage industry sectors. Marcia has worked in the workforce development field since 1998, spearheading a number of state-level task forces, projects, initiatives focused on meeting the workforce demands of industry. In January 2021, she received, very rightly, the State of Michigan Symbol of Excellence Award. So, our witnesses should know that you will each have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony. Your written testimony will certainly be included in the record for the hearing. When you've completed your spoken testimony, we will begin with questions. Each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel, and if you're all right, Ms. Mefford, we'll start with you for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chairwoman Stevens and Congresswoman Dingell and distinguished members of the subcommittee for inviting me to testify today. My name is Jennifer Mefford, and I currently serve as the national co-chair of the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program, or EVITP. It seems fitting to be here with you in Michigan, where EVITP began around the time of the launch of the Chevy Bolt. We began as a convening of stakeholders, including automakers, utility companies, charging manufacturers, and safety and electrical professionals, all focused on charging installation best practices and standards, and specifically the critical role of the electrician with EV charging service and maintenance. Getting the charging experience and safety right was critical then, and it remains critical today. So we rolled up our sleeves and built EVITP together. Partner advisors volunteered time, expertise, and content to develop a comprehensive, brand-agnostic, nonprofit training curriculum for licensed electricians, or in states without licensing, electricians with an equivalent of 8,000 hours of on-the-job training. EVITP training and certification is an 18-hour comprehensive course, plus 2-hour proctored exam. To date, we've certified thousands of qualified electricians in all 50 states and have hundreds of affiliated contractors and are recognized by the U.S. Department of Energy and in the official National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure NEVI formula program guidance to states as a highly regarded training program for electricians working on EV charging installations. EV infrastructure projects are primarily comprised of the electrical construction work skills deployed by experienced electricians every day. Adding advanced EVITP training to an experienced electrician's considerable skills is critical to performing accurate site assessment, load calculations, adequate sizing, panel upgrades, and much more. It's not a simple dryer outlet. the majority of EV charging today happens at home. Single-family, multifamily, apartment living, and the addition of new capabilities like bi-directional charging for the Ford F-150 Lightning all present different site access, power requirements, and states of readiness for an experienced electrician to consider. Other considerations like panel size and capacity, for example. For example, in Detroit and Cincinnati and many other cities, many homes have 60 to 100 amp service, which is likely not enough to add charging right out of the gate. And while upgrading electrical components and panels does increase the cost of EV charging installations, it's essential for the safety of workers, residents, and first responders. It's really all about safety. The role of the experienced electrician is critical, especially in areas where electrical inequity may exist due to older infrastructure. Currently, 17 states do not require electricians to be licensed. The ability to verify experience and expertise through a nationally recognized EV training and certification program, EVITP, will ensure that consumers in all market segments are working with highly skilled, properly trained electricians. Again, it's all about safety. So how many electricians will it take to get the job done? We're here in Michigan, so I'm going to cite a Michigan example. There are currently 19,637 state-licensed electricians and master electricians in Michigan. More than 450 have advanced EVITP certification skills already. Again, we began 10 years ago, and we've been upskilling workers ever since. Michigan has 6,577 registered apprentices. If Michigan installs 50,000 charging stations over the next 3 years, working in crews of varying sizes that include EVITP certified electricians, non-EVITP electricians, and electrical apprentices, Michigan needs 90 EVITP electricians, 69 non-EVITP electricians, and 118 electrical apprentices to install 50,000 charging stations in 3 years. That's 277 electrical workers out of a total of 26,000 plus, or a little over roughly 1%. So the good news is that for today, we're okay, and that really mirrors out across the country. Frankly, there's been very little infrastructure that's come in, and we've been actively upskilling the workforce for a decade. So we're very excited about where we go from here. But of course, we have to prepare not for where we are today, but for where we're going. We understand that this market is growing rapidly, and we need to be on top of that and in front of it. So from a workforce perspective, it's a great time to become an electrician. It's a great time to be one and a great time to become one. The entire industry is growing. Electric vehicles, solar, energy storage, smart technologies, grid improvements, and of course the manufacturing for all these great facilities to support the industry all offer workforce opportunities for many, including electricians. The best way to get more qualified electricians is through the U.S. Department of Labor Registered Apprenticeship Programs and quality pre-apprenticeship programs. Registered apprenticeship programs have a proven track record of success in training individuals to succeed in the construction trades for long-term careers with great wages, benefits, and retirement security. Quality pre-apprenticeship programs prepare individuals for registered apprenticeships. These programs are crucial for engaging returning citizens, veterans, minorities, and other underrepresented groups that have traditionally been left out of the construction industry and oftentimes play a critical role in remediating math skills that are so important to be a highly qualified electrician. The industry will also need more qualified electrical contractors. Partnerships with community colleges and universities may offer vital dual-track education to prepare more electricians to become contractors. Charging infrastructure plays a key role in the expansion of the EV market. While the number of licensed and certified electricians in the U.S. today is adequate for current installations, additional training for existing experienced electricians and onboarding of new electricians through registered apprenticeship programs and quality pre-apprentice programs will be key to meet future demand. These need to be dual tracks worked at the same time, but the good news is that we have the infrastructure from a training perspective in place to do that. The EVITP training and certification program ensures a high level of electrical safety and performance in EV charging installation in all markets. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I look forward to questions as we move through the meeting.
We're one witness in, and we can already tell we would like to be here all day. given how exciting and important this topic is. But with that, we're going to move to Mr. Cruz for 5 minutes of opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Stevens, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to join this meeting, this hearing here today. My name is Ben Cruz, and I'm Director for the Center of Advanced Automotive Technology at Macomb Community College. And I am honored to join the committee to talk about building a workforce to support the future of electric vehicles. From my perspective and my role at Macomb Community College, CAAT, CAAT is the Center for Advanced Automotive Technology. I'm going to refer to it as CAAT from here on. I believe that Detroit's taken a new leadership role in EV engineering and EV manufacturing. Recent news from OEMs, including GM, Ford, Chrysler, Nissan, Toyota, as well as other companies, document that they are fast forward in investments in advanced EV technology, EV manufacturing, EV development, EV design, and anything that has to do with the EV industry. Equally as significant is the number of Tier 1 EV system and component suppliers. These are the companies that supply, to the OEMs. They have a strong presence here in Detroit and the Detroit area. While this is good for Southeast Michigan, our region is not alone in working to attract electric vehicle manufacturing and related industries. Several states are putting together a great deal of effort in becoming significant players in the EV industry ecosystem. Fostering and maintaining a robust skilled workforce will be a key component to attracting and retaining these industry members. Currently, we have a shortage here locally in the EV technical skilled workers in the area of vehicle development, vehicle design, vehicle test, the research and development activity. That needs attention. Representatives from several of our companies I've named have come to Macomb Community College to look for potential employees. In most cases, they are also looking for training programs to upskill their current incumbent workers. Developing courses and training programs in emerging technologies requires input from industry experts. CAAT works hard to keep current with trending automotive advancements by developing and cultivating partnerships with industry. We work collaboratively with industry. Working collaboratively with industry is the foundation from which the development of courses and programs come from. And this is for degree programs and non-credit workforce training. This ensures providing our students with the most relevant training to support them in gaining higher technical skill sets that are needed to work in the area companies involved in the electric vehicle industry. Macomb Community College offers associate degree programs in automotive technology, engineering technology, including an associate degree like the Vehicle Engineering Technician Program, the Automotive Manufacturing Technician Program. Additionally, Macomb CAAT also has several courses in EV power electronics, electrical drive systems, and as well as several industry-related workforce development programs. The Macomb's Vehicle Engineering Technician Program was developed with input from Continental, Bosch, GM, and it's a unique program that blends aspects of automotive systems, mechanical systems, electronics, instrumentation, software skills, in preparing these students with an expertise to be able to work in engineering laboratories, engineering test proving grounds, and other development facilities of the OEMs. Macomb CAAT also works to connect students to the next level of education in automotive mobility-related programs. Building on their initial education at Macomb, students can pursue a bachelor's degree in automotive EV engineering technology or a bachelor's of science degree in engineering through our partners at Wayne State University, a local university here in Detroit. We also recognize the importance of introducing to the youth the possibilities and opportunities of career and emerging automotive technologies. We have STEM outreach programs that span through 5th through 12th grade with hands-on building projects that demonstrate the performance of wind power, electrical solar cells, battery electric power cars, embedded programming, autonomous vehicle systems. And then with the 7th and 8th grade students, we work with electrified and automated smart robot cars, engaging the students in constructing, programming the microcontrollers, and then showcasing the autonomous vehicle performance. Additionally, for high school students, here, Macomb and CAAT support FIRST Robotics. We teach teens fabrication skills, and we teach teams embedded microcontroller programming. This is something that's going to be used in the autonomous vehicle area. In conclusion, there is still much work that needs to be done. Significant effort must be placed in training the new workforce, upskilling incumbent workers, training underrepresented populations, and conducting effective outreach K through 12 to engage and expand youth interest in skilled trades, technology, and emerging fields. Thank you.
Phenomenal. And with that, we'll hear from Mr. Nassar for 5 minutes of testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stevens and members of the subcommittee and guests. Really honored to be here today on behalf of not just the 1 million members of UAW and retirees, but also our president, Ray Curry, and the executive board. It's really fair to say that the majority of UAW's members and retirees' livelihood and retirement security depends on the success of the U.S. auto industry. There's an awful lot at stake here for UAW members and retirees, but also it's much broader than that because it's also, we're talking about the communities where folks live in, and the fact that, auto manufacturing has always been the cornerstone of domestic manufacturing in the U.S., and as this transition happens, we need to keep it that way. But the reality is that U.S. auto workers are facing a lot of difficulties and headwinds. When you adjust for inflation over the past 15 or so years, you see that wages have not kept up with productivity and cost of living at all for auto workers. In fact, it's dropped by about 20%, again, when adjusted for inflation. Why is that happening? Well, it's happening for a plethora of reasons. Bad policies, frankly, tax laws that reward offshoring, trade policies that are basically have been written by corporations instead of for workers, weak labor law, a lack of having procurement policy, but overwhelmingly, we've lacked an industrial policy. I think it's really important to point out that, China, for example, has, they have made at least $60 billion worth of support to foster their EV industry, which is far ahead of ours. And they're also dominating the supply chain. And some people tend to, will assume that they dominate the supply chain for electric batteries because of some kind of geographic advantage. But that's really not true. The vast majority of the minerals they're not located in China. It's just they've been very proactive, and they've had a policy of trying to secure, domination in EVs. And we haven't done that. And it's happening. The EV transition's happening. While it's still a small percent of the overall auto market, there's no question it's going to grow. So the question is not whether more EVs are going to be on the road or built, but where are they going to be built and what kind of jobs are they going to support. So it's really going to be important that the federal government use all levers of power to ensure that taxpayer money to support this industry is used in support of creating and maintaining good union jobs. That's absolutely critical. We have seen, there's quite a few startups in this industry. We don't know a lot of times kind of how they're going to interact with their workforce, but, we have seen troubling things from many foreign-based auto companies who are unionized in their home countries, and then when they come to the U.S., they take a very hostile view towards unions. There are companies, that their only facilities that are non-union are their U.S. facilities. So clearly we have a lot to do as far as labor law, as far as creating incentives to reward the creation of good union jobs. That's one of the reasons why we're so happy with the House-passed Build Back Better and the Kilby Stabenow EV tax credit that actually encourages and rewards the creation of good union jobs and also encourages cars to be made domestically. We think that's really important. And we hope the Senate, will pursue those policies. But the real bottom line here is that we cannot leave workers behind. This cannot be a process where workers are an afterthought, where we just leave it up to the decisions made in corporate boardrooms and Wall Street to decide where this industry is going to be built and where these jobs are going to be made. And we need to secure the entire supply chain, from the gathering, of minerals to the production of the batteries, not just the battery packs, but the all the way through. As far as job training, and getting folks ready. We absolutely need to have a focus on that. I will point out that UAW has successfully worked with many of our employers through our collective bargaining to have really effective apprenticeship programs. I think that's something that I encourage the Congress, this committee, to look at, where people basically are skilled to the new technologies. There's constant evolution in the auto industry. Auto workers are prepared to make the vehicles of the future. They're doing it already, but this transition is not going to be as successful. It's not going to be as good for workers as it needs to be unless Congress is very proactive here and unless we have very deliberate policies. And again, we can't just go with the idea that, whatever corporations decide to do or invest in, that's going to solve it all, because that won't end well for working people and for our communities. So thank you for the opportunity to testify. I really look forward to answering the questions. Again, it's an honor to be here today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Josh. And with that, we'll hear from Ms. Black-Watson virtually.
Good morning. I apologize for not being able to be there. My intention was US 23 North has been shut down, and I am sitting on the side of the road with my hazard blinkers on, but I'm happy to be before you this morning. So Chairwoman Stevens and the distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you so much for the opportunity to testify at this important hearing to explore the workforce needs of the mobility and electrification industry. My name is Marcia Black-Watson, and I serve as Industry Engagement Director for the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, Office of Employment and Training. Our agency, also known as LEO ENT, develops customized workforce solutions for both businesses and individuals, including those individuals with disabilities. We accomplish this through a myriad of programs hand in hand with partners at the federal, state, and local level. Recognizing the importance of the future of mobility, by executive order, Governor Whitmer created both a council and an office on future mobility and electrification, and the position of Chief Mobility Officer within our department. The council, who is responsible for public policy recommendations that will maintain Michigan's leadership in mobility and electrification, cited in their 2020 report that industry is expected to need 12,000 new workers by 2030. Already since 2019, more than 15,000 mobility and automotive manufacturing jobs have been created, many supporting increased EV manufacturing right here in Michigan. So as mobility and electrification continues to develop, investments in manufacturing, technology, and testing are leading to significant growth that we've heard about earlier in our state, expanding opportunities for companies, investors, and workers alike. Michigan is positioned, we have positioned ourselves to be at the center of that growth by proactively preparing the talent needed for current, emerging, and future jobs and career pathways. Now, one such effort at the state level is the Michigan Revolution for Electrification of Vehicles, also known as the Michigan EV Jobs Academy, which is the state of Michigan's initial $5 million, 5-year effort supporting an employer-led collaborative approach. This approach is designed to respond to specific knowledge and skill demands of the industry. LEO ENT competitively awarded these grant funds to the Southeast Michigan Community Alliance's Workforce Intelligence Network, also known as SIMCA-WIN, to sustain and expand the Academy's multiple collaboratives. The SIMCA-WIN partnership with LEO ENT leverages the Michigan Alliance for Greater Mobility Advancement, or MAGBA. It is an existing collaborative established in 2009 to address skill gaps among professional workers, such as technicians and engineers, needing training to design and build hybrid vehicles. Magma has a governing board of OEOs, suppliers, and educational institutions, and the Academy leans on Magma's experience, their established structure, leadership, and employer champions for the development of its collaborative. Using a multi-step supply chain approach to workforce development, the Academy is focused on closing skill gaps across the state and serving historically underrepresented or underserved populations while creating a comprehensive end-to-end talent pipeline. This will be done by the identification of projected job openings, skills, and competencies, by reskilling, upskilling, and training both incumbent workers and job seekers. Career awareness, exploration, promotion, and advancement opportunities of in-demand occupations as well. A recent survey of the Academy employers identified top in-demand entry-level, middle-skilled, and high-tech jobs. This is from assemblers up to the career ladder to electrical engineering technologists. The Academy will deliver measurable return on investment for both employers and learners. Initial outcomes include enrolling about 700 learners into training, close to 500 completing training, and nearly 50% of those obtaining new employment. So by working collaboratively across both private sector and the public sector, we will continue to encourage EV adoption in Michigan, support our workforce, and build our manufacturing core. So thank you for this opportunity again to testify today on this important topic, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you to our witnesses, and allow me to say for the record, I'm in my 4th year of chairing this subcommittee, and never have we had such a dedicated witness. And if there is any member of the press here, let it be captured beyond the record, the true dedication that our professionals and our stakeholders have to this technology, to the workforce, and to the training of Michigan workers. This is absolutely remarkable. With that, though, since we are joined by a distinguished colleague of mine from the Michigan delegation and also from the Energy and Commerce Committee, I'd like to start with 5 minutes of questioning from my colleague, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to start with Mr. Nassar from the United Auto Workers, if he can hear me. Mr. Nassar, what are the potential consequences for the United States auto workers if the U.S. embraces a rapid transition to EVs without significantly scaling up domestic manufacturing capabilities?
Well, I mean, if we don't have the demand and we don't have the infrastructure, the sales simply will not happen to the degree that we need them to. And ultimately, the EVs will be built elsewhere and will be imported. So, I mean, what we really need to do is put policies that lower the cost of EVs so more consumers can buy them. And we absolutely have to create the infrastructure and help the retooling to make this happen. But I want to reemphasize, when federal money, when taxpayer money is given to companies, we think that they have a responsibility to create good jobs and maintain good jobs in the U.S.
So let me build on that. Do you think that the current suite of federal initiatives is paying enough attention, or we've done what we need to do to get to even that 50% goal for 2030? And then on top of that, do you think we're doing enough for the workers' challenges in training?
The answer is no, unfortunately, to those questions. I don't think we're doing enough. I think the House took some important action, but there's not a bill on the president's desk to really lower the cost of EVs and to have, again, that support for the supply chain and for the infrastructure. So I think a heck of a lot more investment is needed, and a lot more, really what I would say is industrial policy. Well, the other thing too is that we need to make sure that the battery jobs are good union jobs. They're auto jobs, no doubt about it. They're moving a car forward. But, you know, it's not assured by any way that they're going to be the good middle-class union jobs that they need to be. So there's a lot of open questions out there. A ton of work to be done. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it does partially. I think that a lot of people don't understand that there are a lot of things that happen to get to that goal. And then I want to build on that last point that you were making about what can be done to mitigate the worker displacement and then ensure that these new jobs are good-paying jobs that are providing worker protections, which many workers are worried about.
Well, the first most fundamental thing is making sure workers have an ability to have a voice on the job. Because what we're seeing now, not just in the auto industry, but across the economy, is a really hostile atmosphere towards workers having a voice. When workers having a voice, you have more investment, you have better jobs, you have better retention. That's just a fact. But what we're seeing now is, you know, our labor laws, you know, they're so anemic, the penalties are so weak for breaking the law that it creates little disincentive for employers that are just hell-bent on not having a unionized workforce with a voice. So passing the PRO Act, which the House has done, the Senate really needs to do that. Just one thing, just one example, captive audience meetings. In most union drives, the vast majority of them, where employers are opposed, they'll have daily meetings where they force workers to go in there and just get lectured about all the harm that will happen to them and their career and their lives if a union is there. And it really wears people down, and it's obviously very intimidating. That's something that the PRO Act would eliminate, would not make them mandatory anymore. So strengthening labor law, giving workers a voice is the first fundamental step. But again, you need these you know, suite of other policies to really make sure those investments and those jobs are going to be in the U.S.
Thank you. Not that I'm testifying, but I want to add mineral development to that list and battery R&D. Let me go to Ms. Mefford. The U.S. Department of Transportation has launched its 6th round of funding to establish alternative fuel corridors across the United States. The administration has also announced the new NEVI formula program, which will provide nearly $5 billion over the next 5 years to help states create this network of EV charging stations that we need along these routes. First, can you articulate why it's important for the economy that the United States continue to push for the electrification of transportation infrastructure, including through the creation of these charging stations across the country?
Sure. The infrastructure really plays such a critical role in the growth of the market as a whole. Consumer confidence, consumer ability to really purchase a vehicle, make sure that it serves all of their needs, and that they feel really comfortable and confident purchasing that vehicle is very dependent on the infrastructure access. I have these conversations often as I move through markets and around the country. Consumers are very excited about the EV products coming to market. The auto industry is doing an amazing job designing and manufacturing really cool vehicles that people want. The hesitation at this moment is still, what does the infrastructure piece look like? So I'm very excited about the plans and the investment in building out these infrastructure corridors. While most charging is still happens at the home, people want to know they can get from place to place and drive and be mobile in their communities and their lives as they normally would with a different type of vehicle. So infrastructure plays a key role in the expansion.
So I'm going to build on that till I'm going to submit questions for the record because I had 3 more for you and we won't get it. But I don't think most people understand that most people buying EVs right now are for short distances. And what we're trying to do by getting to that zero emission by 2030 is that, you know, the F-150 will do everything the F-150 can do now, including getting from here all the way up to the Upper Peninsula. So can you be even clearer that they want to know that they can get a charge if they need it? Is that, or if
Yes.
they're going to take a longer trip?
Yes, so, you know, I'm fortunate to be able to talk to really a lot of consumers in convenings and have been over the last 10 years. And this market has shifted so much since that time. When the Volt came out, it was really designed for the average driver going 40 miles a day, right? So consumers want to have a vehicle that fits their complete lifestyle, and they just want it to be electric. So being able to, you know, Michigan, the amazing tourism state. They want to be able to go from Southeast Michigan up to Mackinac. They want to be able to go across the state to the west side of the state. They want to be able to live their lives as they normally would, just in an electric vehicle. That's where those corridors and the thoughtful placement of fast charging, as well as level 2 charging, and the accessibility of that charging becomes really critical. I travel a lot for my work, and I'm on the road a lot. And one of my considerations is, where are those chargers located? How does it feel when I'm there? Is it well lit? Are there security cameras? What's happening to me as a consumer when I'm interfacing with that charging station? Again, infrastructure is just starting to come to the market, but what's been in place at this point has been there for a while in many instances. Not uncommon for 25% of charging stations to not be operable when you get there. That's a huge issue. That's a huge issue for a consumer. So the installation is a piece of it. The service and maintenance is also a critical piece of it. But for me, also the security and the thoughtful, again, design and planning of where these stations are and what that consumer experience really looks like will help accelerate this market. The vehicles that are planned and coming out and being made here, many here in Michigan, I mean, it's amazing. And they're so exciting. But we have to shore up that infrastructure piece to get those vehicles with consumers.
Thank you. I'm out of time, and I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, the chair will recognize herself for 5 minutes of questioning. We do have other members of Congress participating in this hearing who will be asking questions, and I will be recognizing them next. I also wanted to take a minute of personal privilege to recognize the mayor of Plymouth, Nick Morose, who has joined us as well. Plymouth, Michigan has certainly been in the list of communities that has been eager to be an EV infrastructure adopter and has kept their eyes on the prize of this proliferating technology opportunity. And also, as a point of personal privilege, given the nature of this hearing, EVs are complicated. They are new, exciting technologies. They are a moonshot of the 21st century, something that we recognize as coming from a place called home, a place called Michigan, but are also a part of the broader plight of our automotive industry to achieve zero emissions, right? It is common to say in industry, zero emissions, not just electric vehicles, but also recognizing the potential that comes from hydrogen technologies, similar development of skateboards, and I guess you want to say technology, but also just manufacturing. And that also has a huge presence here in southeastern Michigan from Forvia, otherwise known as Forcia, a large tier 1 supplier producing hydrogen platforms for vehicles, Noble Gas, which exists in Novi. And we also know in the Infrastructure Jobs and Investment Act that hydrogen hubs were designated, received designated funding, and certainly want to see Michigan in line for that as well, all ways in which we're going to win the future. But with that, the U.S. Department of Transportation, as the previous questioner had mentioned, has announced that NEVI formula program to provide nearly $5 billion in funding over the next 5 years to help states create a network of EV charging stations. And so just to dive a little deeper, Ms. Mefford, just any other things that you can mention about workforce barriers. And certainly in your testimony, you gave a lot of notes of inspiration, which we appreciate. But any other workforce barriers that you could touch on to overcome getting these EV charging stations into communities?
Certainly, thank you. Our training program is really designed for existing experienced licensed electricians, and in states without licensing, those that have 8,000 hours. So I think goal number 1 was really to upskill existing electricians to work very safely. Understanding that we're building skills, we're building a new technology, an EV charger infrastructure on top of existing skill level. So that was really one of those, one of the first goals. The second goal, of course, looking at not only the EV pipeline of work coming, but looking at the integration of solar, of energy storage, of security, of grid resiliency. All of this is in that electrical space. So it really does need to be a parallel effort to onboard new folks into an apprenticeship. One of the things I've seen that's worked extremely successfully, especially in communities that may not be interacting with the construction industry as a whole, are qualified pre-apprenticeship programs where they're experiential in nature. And they let an individual look at the electrical pathway, connect to it, have on-the-job experience, all of it, and explore whether this is really for them, and then also be connected to those meaningful Department of Labor recognized apprenticeships. So it's truly a career pathway. One of the barriers at that point can be math skills. It absolutely requires a high level of algebra, geometry, and trigonometry competency to be a successful electrician at this level. So those qualified pre-apprenticeship programs and even partnerships with our community college network can really help address any of those deficits that may occur that might be a barrier for an individual coming into a qualified pre-apprenticeship, moving into apprenticeship, and then into a successful career as an electrician. And the goal is to get them in the training and the qualities and qualifications where they can work in any electrical sector. So it is truly a career pathway.
Well, that is certainly quite powerful. And Mr. Nassar, in your written testimony, you had referenced the decision that I've been eyeing very closely from Oshkosh Defense to move their awarded $6 billion contract, let me say that again for the people in the back, $6 billion contract to build the next generation vehicles for the U.S. Postal Service to a totally new non-union plant. Instead of having UAW members in Wisconsin carry out this lucrative contract. We have seen the pitfalls that happen when some auto manufacturers look to reduce their labor costs by building EV manufacturing facilities in non-union friendly places where right-to-work laws allow companies to shortchange their workers on wages, benefits, and workplace safety standards. And certainly, the Congresswoman, the chair, is enthusiastic for the PRO Act. But this egregious decision that I've referenced is one of the reasons why I introduced the Union Auto Workers Job Protection Act. This is a bill that will require bids and contracts to build motor vehicles for the federal government to stipulate in which plants motor vehicles will be made or assembled. So if a contract awardee wants to move production, they must get written permission from the executive agency and provide the same day notification to impacted labor unions when they seek permission. So Mr. Nassar, how can policy work to reverse the migration of EV manufacturing to the South and reward employers who are doing right by their workers?
Well, I mean, in addition to kind of just have workers having a stronger voice in general, really think there has to be, like your legislation, there has to be a real, intentional effort to ensure that companies who are benefiting from large public contracts, have an accountability for what they're doing with their workforce. As far as we can tell, so there's an incumbent workforce. It's been there for over 80 years in Oshkosh that the company apparently is deciding to ignore. And that's just unacceptable. And so what has to happen is, we've got to have far more transparency, and there really has to be, this has to be taken into account. It needs to be a factor, like how are the taxpayer dollars, how are these investments going to impact the communities where manufacturing is taking place and the actual workforce. So just a far more deliberate and kind of a cross-government approach is needed. There's a lot of work to do in this area. It's a decision that we hope the Postal Service and Oshkosh, will change and revisit and do the right thing here.
Great. Thank you so much. And Ms. Black-Watson, what are the barriers to entry and retention for women and people of color working in the EV, automotive, electrician, and construction occupations? And what steps is the state of Michigan taking to provide more opportunities for future EV workers from underrepresented groups?
Thank you for that question. Yes, the barriers really stem from a number of different factors. One is awareness and exposure to opportunities of these careers and career pathways that oftentimes individuals in underrepresented population groups are not aware of. And then, so really being very intentional and strategic about outreach and promotion, and that's why some of our efforts are really focused on working very closely with our workforce development boards, the 16 across the state or the Michigan Works agencies, as well as the community colleges that have access to individuals with underrepresented populations. Another barrier oftentimes are sort of the upfront requirements and some of the employment barriers that really exist. If you're thinking about, I mean, we've seen this a lot with the pandemic, child care and transportation to these employment opportunities. And so our efforts are really stem towards, one, assessing and identifying these barriers, and then two, making sure that there are supportive services that are available to mitigate the barriers, not just to employment, but also to education and training. We've talked about the various modes of training, including courses and programs, degree programs, as well as registered apprenticeship programs. So we certainly want to make sure that underrepresented populations who haven't been able to enjoy the benefits of training and the good paying jobs that are associated with this industry have the ability to do so by mitigating those barriers from all different facets.
Great, thank you so much. And I am out of time, but certainly don't want to overlook Mr. Cruz and the role that you are playing in our EV workforce. So we will dog ear that, and I will turn to my colleague, Congressman Tonko from New York, who has joined us virtually for 5 minutes of questioning. Thank you so much for being here, Congressman Tonko.
It's my pleasure, and thank you, Chair Stevens, for holding what I believe is a very important hearing on a critical topic, a vital topic, and I do appreciate your enthusiasm. America's auto industry has a strong history with union labor. Good union auto worker jobs have supported the building and the strengthening of our American middle class. It is crucial that we continue this tradition as we move forward into the next era of transportation. As part of that, it's also very important that we make certain that the EV workforce is representative of our diverse society and that everyone has access to good-paying, secure jobs in this sector. So I'm proud and pleased to see community colleges represented here today. I think these institutions are invaluable to the training of skilled technical workers for the growing clean energy sector. In my district, Hudson Valley Community College is doing a fantastic job with the critical mission of training people for clean energy and advanced manufacturing jobs. And they have emphasized that they're going to make certain that the diversity of my district is well represented in that workforce pipeline. So, Mr. Cruz, can you share with us more about the role of community colleges in developing a diverse technical workforce and what further support would be helpful toward that mission?
Yes. First of all, there are obviously some there are obviously some barriers, to get more students into the community college, and some of those have to do with what Mrs. Black-Boston was talking about, and that's the barriers of transportation, the barriers of child care, giving or offering an opportunity to pay for an education via a scholarship or a grant, for an individual doesn't necessarily give that person the ability to attend those classes, because there are many other problems in the underrepresented areas that can be significant barriers to even getting that education. Additionally, there's some academic barriers that's been stated a little bit here with Mr. Nassar, Mr. Nassar and Mrs. Watson, that there's the mathematical barrier. There is. I'm sorry, that was you, Mefford. That there's a barrier, to the math that's actually required in some of the electrical and some of the pre-engineering classes that are at community colleges. However, that is being mitigated by providing tutors, by providing people that can actually coach, these individuals to be able to, get that background, to be able to continue and finish the courses. In terms of, recruitment, our community college certainly has, a process and a strategy to be able to go out and do outreach in the lower socioeconomic areas, the underrepresented areas, and we are pushing to make sure that we do offer these areas an opportunity to come to school and have the opportunity to come and take part in a lot of our educational classes at Macomb.
Thank you. And I understand from IBEW that the electric vehicle infrastructure training program is vital to strengthening their members' skills in EV infrastructure installation. So, Ms. Mefford, can you speak to EVITP's role in supporting a union workforce and how the program contributes to equity, both in workforce numbers and in access to EV infrastructure?
Yes, thank you for the question. EVITP is open to all. So we are really an industry-wide program, and we look to certify qualified electricians that are licensed in states with licensing and electricians in states without licensing that have 8,000 hours of experience. We are really looking to support electricians at a high level to make sure that they have specific training for the EV industry, to make sure that all those installations are done safely. One of the things I wanted to just circle back on too is some of our efforts. We were fortunate enough to work with Bloomberg Philanthropy American Cities Climate Challenge on 26 cities in the U.S. to deliver scholarships to qualified electricians. 50% of those scholarships for EVITP training were for women and underrepresented groups. So we're actually currently in the process of doing that right now, but there are over 1,200 scholarships that have been awarded around the country to make sure that those existing qualified electricians in underrepresented groups are receiving EVITP training. Certainly we support union electricians. We support non-union electricians. We are really looking to create a wonderful standard of safety and competency in the electrical industry to support EV charging.
Thank you. I ran out of my time, I see, but Mr. Nassar, I'll get a question over to you and have you respond in writing, but it was about describing some of the benefits of historically having a unionized automaking workforce in the U.S. So if you could share that in written context with the committee, subcommittee, I would appreciate it. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back and I applaud your leadership on the issue.
Yeah, thank you so much, Congressman Tonko, and thank you for your leadership and always the bright contributions to this committee and our hearings. I'm really excited to introduce our next member of Congress who's joining us virtually, a dear friend as well, Congressman Don Norcross from New Jersey.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We really appreciate the kind introduction and more importantly, thank you for holding this hearing. The vision and knowing what this means to our country and to the next generation of workers is incredibly important. And again, we appreciate it. And I wish that all our members could be here today listening to what is going to be the future. And I know we use that quite often, but this is real. So I love hearing questions from my colleagues about electricians. Gee, I happen to be one. We have 200 lawyers, God bless them, but we have an electrician, and certainly going to the other four-year school, which was an apprenticeship, gave me a little bit different view. And I have been following this, been out to Michigan several times. You have a great district, Ms. Haley, and more importantly, when I was out there, one of the major features we were looking at was the next generation of technology. I was over at GM, the battery technology development, the fuel cells, and I chair, in addition to being on education and labor, tactical air and land, which talks about our military and where they're going. So GM literally is on the cutting edge of the ISV. It's their next generation of squad vehicle, how it can be electrical. And that technology, as I went through the plant, is just sitting there on display and being put right into not only the cars we're driving on the road, but helping to make sure that our servicemen and women have the best appropriate vehicles that they can have. And that happens to be electric in many cases. So when I hear about trained electricians, standards, we see the difficult fight between what they want to do is break down those standards. And this is why this program that Ms. Mefford, you're talking about, the EVIT program, becomes very personal to me. A, to make sure those who are going to install it have the right training. In addition to making sure that they have a job that pays the right amount and benefits and certainly retirement, but it gets installed correctly, because what I've seen, unfortunately, what happens when that doesn't happen. Not only does the worker get injured or killed, but in this case, when you go to plug in your car, you want to make sure it's correct and it doesn't blow up, kill you. So talk to me about those standards that are set into place here and why that's important, because you mentioned we're taking those who have been through an apprenticeship or a training program, 8,000 hours. But this is additional training because of its connection to not only cars, but people.
Yes, thank you for that question. So EVITP began really as this coalition of stakeholders that really wanted the EV industry to evolve out of safety, right? They wanted to make sure that installations were done safely and at the highest level. And that included automakers and utility companies and the NFPA and NEIS and everybody that needed to look at this to make sure that we were building a program that met all those needs. The goal has always been to make sure that installations are done safely for any market, residential, commercial, public, fleet. And it continues to be that today. So that's why we built this additional credential for qualified electricians. That's 18 hours. It speaks to every aspect of the charging infrastructure industry, load calc, site assessments, the integration of solar, storage, you name it. This market is changing so rapidly. And one of the things that I think is so powerful about the partner advisor group that is still with EVITP today is that they are from industry. So as the industry changes and advances, as charging technology changes and advances, we are able to source that material directly from industry and integrate it into the curriculum, which keeps it fresh. We're on our 4th iteration of EVITP right now. It's a dramatically different course than it was 10 years ago because this is a dramatically different EV industry. It will change again. I am personally very excited to see the advances in charging technology, bidirectional charging, sequential charging. I think that in 5 years, 3 years, we'll probably see a whole different level of charging in vehicle that we are today. And that's really exciting. But that will require us to continue to evolve training and to make sure that qualified electricians and credentialed electricians are the ones that are interacting with this technology because on the other end of it, they're consumers. And it needs to be done properly and safely. Thank you.
Certainly appreciate it. As my time runs out, just to reiterate that the connection to those existing, particularly in the apprenticeship programs, whether it's the IBW, which has the largest, is that as it changes, and you mentioned you're already through 4 changes, it continues to connect to those electricians in the field so they have the latest and safest way of doing it. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, again, appreciate the hearing, and I yield back.
Well, thank you, and I think all of us can see here in Oakland County how fortunate we are in the Congress to have such engaged colleagues and eager champions of the topic at hand. And I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. As I mentioned in the opening remarks, this hearing is absolutely historic. It is absolutely a part of a House record. It is absolutely a part of a moonshot that we are leading here in Oakland County and throughout southeastern Michigan. And it's also been a little historic because we've had witnesses engage in a hybrid fashion. Again, our deep appreciation to Ms. Black Watson for her dedication and zooming in from her car to testify. I think the things that she was able to touch on, and by the way, for those who listened to her opening remarks, her written opening remarks alongside our other witnesses were really quite fantastic with some of the charts and the graphics and the deep thinking that the state of Michigan through Leo is bringing to just this one workforce topic on EVs, and absolutely needs to be commended, and particularly through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, something that we hear over and over and over again on the Science Committee. Let's not leave people behind, right? Let's not leave behind our own talent geographically or demographically. And certainly, I laud the testimony of, our other witnesses from UAW to our training programs here at the community college and those that Ms. Mefford mentioned. So that's the deep gratitude to our witnesses, our deep gratitude to our audience members, particularly our community members as well. We did have for most of the hearing the head of Oakland County's economic development here, as well as the support of our Oakland County commissioners. So we will leave the record open for 2 weeks for additional statements from members and for additional questions that the committee may ask of our witnesses. I know Congresswoman Deb Ross from Research Triangle, North Carolina, was on for part of the hearing and plans to ask some questions, as well as fellow committee member Congressman Bill Foster of Illinois, who had kind of a pre-hearing to this one in his role on oversight around the R&D needs, the battery needs, the supply chain needs, the technical needs. So with that, the witnesses are excused and the hearing is now adjourned.